Welcome to Shelby Stitcher. This is Joan Parker. I am going to be sharing with you a little bit about how I'm piecing some of my shorter lengths of strips together for my fabric scrap roll. And this is just going to be a casual conversational kind of video. This is the roll I'm working on, and this one's nearly as big as the one that I made when I made my queen size quilt last, and I'll insert a picture in here to show you what that one looked like. And you can see on this roll that some of these have two pieces sewn together, probably very few that you can see right here. Oh, there's another one. And what I do is I try to get a color that isn't going to stand out. I have to pull every string when I see it. It's just an obsession. So I get two colors that match pretty nicely. And this one isn't perfect, but your eye wouldn't pick it up so much unless you're looking for it. And chances are that when I cut my triangle, I'm going to cut down between those anyway, somewhere or somewhere else. And so it won't be so obvious. So I have my piece of tape here that is the width I'm shooting for. I should say the length I'm shooting for. This is right at 4 inches, and instead of pulling out my ruler every time, I just thought it would be easier just to put a piece of washi tape on here. You can see on this one, I need another at least 1.5 inches, and I try to find a piece that is going to be about the same width. And as I sew and as I make videos to share, I'm just sharing a lot of things that I do, and it's not necessarily what you have to do because you get to choose what you do. But I'm giving you an idea of what I do. When I put my strips back into my big bag, my project bag, I use just a Ziploc and I gather up all of these and stack them nicely and put them in here so that I don't have to keep going through those and touching them over and over, knowing that they're too short. If I fold this in half, this will be enough to add on both ends of that because one piece is not going to be enough. So what I'm going to do is just snip that in half. I am going to add this to the top and bottom of this piece, and that should yield me a piece that's big enough to use. I just run these through my machine, and I'm going to set this one back here so that I don't get it mixed in. This one ended up being long enough, so I'll just put it in a separate stack so that I don't go through that one again either. And I know this is an odd color, so I'm probably not going to have another one that's going to match. And I just roughly trim them to the same size with my scissors right here by my sewing machine. Throw that down in my trash can right beside me. I have really, really enjoyed making videos to share. And again, I'm going to take this excess string off and go ahead and put these together. And I pull all the strings off because I do not like to do that at the end. It's very tedious and monotonous, and I just do it as it goes. Now that I've done a couple after this one I'm adding on to, I'm just going to finger press this, which means I'll open it and I'll take my fingernails on my thumb and first finger and just press them out. And you see it lays fairly flat, but I will give it a hit with the iron after I get this over to my ironing station. So what was I saying? Oh, I was just mentioning that I have really enjoyed the feedback. Lately, there have been a couple ladies that have commented on a lot of my videos, and it's just so nice to see that people are enjoying what I'm sharing, what I'm posting on YouTube. And honestly, I never would have seen myself posting videos and doing that type of thing. Some of my children are teasing me about it because they think it's funny, but I have a lot of sewing experience, and I love, love, love to piece quilts and make them for other people, give them as gifts, give them to new brides, new babies. That's always fun. And of course, my quilt, my house has a lot of quilts in it. So again, what I'm doing is laying this down, seeing about how much more I need. That's not much, but I need a piece that is short and that I don't mind cutting the rest of it off of. Here's another. This is not the same red. There's a little orangish red. That might be fine. See, that extends past here even with the seam taken out. So even though these aren't the same color, they're close enough. So I'm just going to put those together, pull that string out. So I'm always sewing up scrap quilts, and people have asked me, do you want more scraps? Yes. I love getting scrap buckets, baskets, bins, whatever, that people are either tired of those fabrics or they've cleaning out their parents' house and they see all these fabrics and they think of me, and I just love that so much. So yes, I will take your scraps. I'm always working on several scrap projects at one time. Let's measure this up. This is really close. If I can find another small light blue, I'm going to add it to this one just to make sure I have more than enough, because I'd rather have a little too much, then not enough. That's fairly short. I see another one. Oh, that's a multicolor. We won't go with that one. I'm just going to add this on here, and then when I go to trim it to my 4-inch strip, I will just use it in the best place for where the seams lie, if that makes sense to you. So I'd like to hear in the comments what kind of quilts you like to make. How long have you been quilting? I took a quilting class at a Minnesota fabric store in Charlotte way back when we were first married, and we've been married for 37 years, so that was quite some time ago. And silly me, I thought they were going to teach how to piece a quilt, but they were actually teaching hand quilting. And I thought hand quilting was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard because we have 8 children now. At that time, we'd had 3, and I wanted to make some quilts for my children who were going into bigger beds. You know, when the kids get out of the crib and they're in a toddler bed or whatever, and then into a twin bed. And we just had, my husband was teaching in a Christian school, and the income was very low. We were always taken care of. God never let us have a need that he didn't meet financially, but we didn't really do extra things like take vacations or eat out or that kind of thing. And that was fine. That was our life, and we chose it. But when it came time to getting all these new beds made, I thought, well, I could probably make a bedspread of some kind. And I'd sewn, as long as I could remember. Both of my grandmothers were very, very talented seamstresses. And my maternal grandmother actually made wedding gowns and veils back in the 60s. And she made bridesmaids' dresses. She had talent galore. And my paternal grandmother made all of her own clothes and pajamas and curtains and pillows and all those kind of things. And her motto was any color as long as it's pink. So, you know, she made all of her dresses out of the same pattern, buttons all the way down the front with little fitted sleeves and a Peter Pan collar. And I just, every time I picture her in a pink dress that had those features. And she had pockets in the sides, and it was just really cool. But she made all of her clothes out of 100% cotton. And obviously that didn't last quite as long as some other fabrics would. So she was always working on sewing something, and I just watched her and was fascinated by the whole process. But here I have 2 really, they would have, if I'd sewn these end to end, it would have been a very narrow strip. So I'm making a little column to go up here, and I can see that I have 3 or 4 more pieces of green. And what do you know, they happen to be just about the right width. So what I'm doing is starting right about the same place on the top, and I'll trim this edge off after I get a piece that's long enough. And I'm just taking this off after I send it through once I've sewn another piece so that I don't have to cut my thread here. Now I've just got this blue and this bright blue and this blue. I guess I could sort of do the same thing here. I'll put these 2 together this way, and this is going to be about 2/3 of the length that I need. So now that I've sewn off the end of the green, I'll cut that off and just move these to the side. And then I'm going to open this up, again, press it with my fingernails. I don't have very strong fingernails, so I don't do it this way where it's pulling my fingernail. I do it backward, just kind of press it, and you can see it lays fairly flat. My iron is right beside me, so I can just hit it with that once in a while. You see that this top is not completely straight, so I'm going to lay it along the left side and leave that little hump just sticking up because my dark green one on top is the straighter of the 2. Trim that off and throw it away right beside me in my trash can. And then after I sew that, I'll reach back and grab this blue one that also needs a little extension on it. I'm just sewing to pass the time right this moment because our church has a midweek service and we need to leave in about an hour and 15 minutes. And I've had a very busy day and I just need to take a break. So this is my break. And that's the last one. I think these 2 aren't enough to make a strip. This one is about 1 inch short. This one, I don't think I'm even going to use that one. So I'll set this behind where you can see my little stack of, I'm not going to use these unless I'm in a big fabric famine, which I have never been in, so many people have given me boxes and bags of scraps, and it's just like a holiday to get to go through those. So here I am taking my little scraps that are too short to use, and I'm going to put these down inside my bag here that I shared this before, my project bag. If you're new here, I showed how I pre-cut these into 4-inch strips. I cut the whole shebang down to 3 3/4. So if I make it 4 inches, that gives me a little more than I need. And that way I can find a good place to trim it off. But I put this Ziploc bag on top so that I know that I won't be using those until they're elongated. And now I'm going to show you that I have all these pieces of 2, and here's a little bunch of 4, and then there's 2 more because I had to trim off that green one and that blue one. Remember, that's why they're not all one big chain. But I like to leave them chained together and take them over here to my ironing area. See if I can get that straightened up and you can see what I'm doing. There it is. Okay, so I just leave these attached together. It makes it easier to move them over to the ironing area. I press them open with my finger and then give them a little hit with the iron. Again, pressing. I do machine quilt for people, so I have the advantage of seeing a lot of other people's piecing. And one of my biggest complaints, if you want to call it that, and that's what I'm calling it, is when people don't press their fabric all the way open, so they have just a little pleat at the end on every seam. And then when I go to quilt them, they don't look very nice because there's always just a little pleat in there. So here's my piece that's exactly 4 inches, and I use that as a guide to trim those down right away to 4 inches. And then here's my second one, which is these 2. This is my new favorite color. I don't know what you call it, turquoise, aqua. Men would probably just call it blue, but I just love that shade. It just is one of my favorite happy colors now. And I use anything because I'm given so many scraps. But if I could pick fabric, it would be that one. Now again, these are all still hooked together, so I'm going to go ahead and go in and trim them with my scissors. And then I'm going to use this one peachish color to be consistent. See, that's just a little about a 1/4 inch too long, but too long is too long. So I'm going to trim that off, put it in my stack. And when I go to use these on my paper foundations, I like to start out with a pieced section, because if I have to fold the fabric over when I put the next piece down and iron it over, if it's on it has a seam in it, it doesn't fold as easily because it's thicker. So what I do when I start, let's pretend like this recipe right here that I just wrote out for a friend is actually my paper foundation. I'll take one that has 2 different pieces so it's easier to see. I'll take this one that has 2 different pieces of fabric, so it has that seam, and I'll lay that one right side up on my foundation, and I will lay this one right side down, sew my seam, and press this one over, and do the same thing over here and press that one away so that this seam doesn't need to be folded over, because that would be a little more of a challenge. Not impossible, just a challenge. And here's one. I'm going to, instead of pushing this down and trimming off that lighter, I'm going to use all of the lighter color and trim off where it's darker down here. And this is okay, that's a little wider there than it is here, but I'm just going to trim off this piece while I have my scissors out to make that just really easy to handle later when I go to add these to the strips I have in my bag already. And again, here's that longer one. And again, if you leave the pieces of string in place, the threads, you can easily cart them all over to your pressing area. And I am blessed with being able to use what was formerly our master bedroom as my sewing studio. The room is long, which is good because my long arm machine is behind me. You've probably seen it in other videos if you've been watching me for very long. But the thing that's nice about it is I can have a little sewing or pressing area here, and to my right is my sewing machine and my sewing table, and right there is my cutting table. So I'm just going to slide these all down. And remember, I had finger pressed these before this light blue, so I have to make sure that those are all the seams are going in the right direction. Again, I pull the strings off to make my little pile of scraps happy. And this blue was not my fabric. It was given to me. And you see there's a really dark line there. I think somebody drew a line with a pen or something like that. So when I cut these apart and trim these, I'm going to make sure I trim off those few threads there. As you can see, there's just a really dark line on there. And I don't know if that's a kind of ink that's going to bleed, and if it is, I don't want bleeding on my fabric. And again, I line up with the shorter edge, and the more you handle these, the more thready they get, and that's why I like to be careful and stack them neatly and not handle them a lot. Yikes. So with Christmas coming up, are you making any Christmas projects? I'm not necessarily making anything for Christmas that's special. The last several years, I've made Christmas quilts for in our living room, and when I get them out and we start using them, I will show them to you. This is a little small to keep. I maybe would keep it, but I'm not going to keep it today because I'm dealing with a lot of small scraps, and you don't have to keep every thread. But anyway, I made 2 different scrappy Christmas quilts for our living room, just for snuggling under with the grandkids or for when we're sitting and watching a movie. And they're really 2 of my favorite quilts, so I'm looking forward to getting those out. And I also have an assortment of pillows that I've made over the years. I should say pillow covers. I bought a nice set of goose down filled pillow forms that are 18 inches square. And I will occasionally make new pillows. We have old pillows, and I like my old pillows, but sometimes it's just nice to have something new. And especially if we're taking a trip and I want something to hand quilt or hand sew on, I'll work up a pillow and I'll make it. And I give those as gifts as well. I think that's something that's fun to give to a new bride. If they don't want an actual bed quilt, I will make several seasonal pillow covers and give them a set of pillow inserts. And that way they have a little bit of seasonal decor if that's their thing. And I ask them, I don't just give, force things on people. Those are very pretty. Green's one of my favorite colors. And here's that same light blue. Can you see how this is longer or wider than this piece? So I'm going to just trim this one down by about 1/8 of an inch and cut that black right off of there and get rid of that. And then here I have the choice of lining my measuring thing up at the top or at the bottom or somewhere in the middle. And this isn't one of my favorite fabrics, so I'm going to start at the top so I use as little of that as possible. I do like all fabrics pretty much, and in my last several scrap endowments or inheritances, I have gotten some really wacky fabrics. And I went to a quilt shop when I was at my son's a couple weeks ago, and I got some real doozies there. But they all play so nicely together when you have something that you're using for the other part of your block. And I'm excited about making another strippy, scrappy half square triangle quilt, and that's what that roll of fabric that I showed you earlier is for. This one right here. I have been adding to this for just a couple weeks actually, and the inside is a pool noodle. I have a pool noodle that I've kept in my sewing closet for a long time, and when I need something to roll things up on, I just chop off a piece of pool noodle. It cuts really, really easily. I'm going to set that back over there. And then here's the last few. Actually, I have 2 more than this because I have one under my sewing machine foot and I have one behind it. So let me get those out. I'm going to take just a little scrap of fabric that I keep beside my sewing machine as a leader ender. And usually when I'm sewing my next quilt as a leader ender, but I didn't have anything prepared, so I do keep a little scrap over there. And when I'm doing this, I make sure that the seam allowances are going the way I start pressing them initially so that they lay nice and flat. Just going to trim that off. Now I'm going to measure the length of it. Okay, I'm going to keep all of that lightest blue because the fabric I'm using for my complement to this is a dark blue fabric, and that bright blue will contrast enough, but this will contrast more, so I'm going to keep more of that one. Then here's 3 more pieces. There's that bright yellow, and it's fun to do this because I remember what I used some of these fabrics for. I made one of my friends from many years ago 2 baby quilts for her 2 grandchildren that she has had about 2 years ago. And it seems like whenever I ask somebody what color they want for something, they always choose colors that I don't have, which I find humorous in some strange, out in the universe kind of way. But she asked for bright yellow, and I was thinking, well, I don't have anything to show her because I have no bright yellow. But this is one of the fabrics that I picked, and she really liked it, so I used that for one of the borders of one of the baby quilts that she had me make. She remembers that when our children, mine and hers, who were right in the same age range, were little, I always had at least one I Spy quilt in my house, and her kids, just as a little bit of insight, I have 8 children and she has 7. But when they would come over to visit, our kids would always be sitting on the floor playing with I Spy quilts. So there's my roll of fabric, and these are the pieces that are pieced that I will be adding in. And I'm going to chat a little bit longer if you want to stay and listen. But anyway, I made 2 I Spy quilts for her 2 grandchildren, and she just says whenever they're at her house and they're looking at their quilts and playing with their quilts, she remembers back to when our children used to play together, and it's just a really good and happy memory for her. So that was really a fun thing. Okay, here's the one that has 4 greens. I need to make sure, whoa, I need to make sure that you're in the view. There it is. This one has 4 fabrics and they're kind of jaggedy on that edge. So what I'm going to do is slide this over so I can use this peach fabric as the guide for what I'm cutting off. So I don't need to use my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to cut that off. And I'll cut off just the sliver up there to get rid of all those strings. And I'm going to trim this darkest part off the bottom there. So there you go. There's my peach one that's my guide, and there, that will just make a nice variation in my scrap roll.